Well, hello to another video on building an e-commerce with Vue, Nuxt, Strapi, GraphQL, Docker, Stripe, and deploy on Amazon EC2. Okay, so the whole idea of this is to create a maintainable and see how feasible and scalable is to build as well as maintain a POC commerce with all of the previous web technology mentioned. Okay, so the methodology or the way of doing that is first looking at the design, the build, the test, and ultimately deploy that. So on the design, first I look at the user interface that we need to build our e-commerce, which in our case is ViewStick. And then here we got it. That's right. Here we are. There you got it. The Vue 3 UI framework for that. Cool. And then now on the build step, first focus on these two front, the backend and the frontend. The backend is, well, to set up is the Strapi. This project where the primary purpose was to build API in an easy way, okay? And they now scale to an open source headless CMS, where now allow developers to choose whatever favorite tool they want and editors to distribute a managed content through the admin panel. So since Strapi is a plugin system like all of these software applications are, so for example, your browser is a plugin based system, Firefox, Chrome, Edge, among others. You can easily extend the capability of your API as well as your admin panel. And it also comes with a user system to manage in detail admin and end user have access to. So then I look at how can I set up a Strapi server. Defining is the base of the most common models on the e-commerce, as well as populate that. Okay, so if we navigate to localhost 1337 and admin, we can navigate this to the we can navigate this to the admin panel, right? So the content type builder is what we define is all of these data structure or the models, and on the content manager is where we populate those models with data, right? So then I look at how can we integrate GraphQL? And you may wonder, why do we need to integrate that? Well, because we can lower our requests and reduce the payload as minimal as possible. In other words, network performance, network optimizations. So instead of setting a GraphQL server from scratch, it comes this GraphQL plugin for Strapi with an Apollo server, and an Apollo, it follows and implements the GraphQL specification, and it acts as the data layer between your mother web applications and the cloud. So also, this plugin comes with something called the shadow crew, which automates the creation of the types, queries, resolvers based on the models you define in the admin panel. So now that I did that, Okay. Then I look at the front end, and especially with Nuxt, and to understand what is the main goal of Nuxt. Okay, it aims to improve the a web developer experience of building modern web applications by first delivering an optimized user experience with several optimization techniques like code splitting, tree shaking, link prefetching, as well as rendering strategy like server-side rendering, client-side rendering, static site generation, incremental static regeneration, state while revalidating, and SEO and Web Vitals, a set of metrics made by the Google developers that represent different facets of the user experience that is measurable and it reflect the real life experience uh, on the real life world. So this set of metrics right now, three, and it will evolve over time. In 2020, it focused on three aspects: the loading, large contentful pane, interactivity, the first input delay, and visual stability, the cumulative layout shift. And and to aim the recommended target, or to ensure that we're hitting the recommended target for most of our users, a good threshold to measure is 75 percentile or 75th percentile of page load, segmented across mobile and desktop. And they offer is field or tools that we can use for fields or for in the field data like page speed insight, as well as lab data like Lighthouse. So another uh, point that Nuxt aim is to improve the developer experience uh, by providing is a plug and play system, which it is a very intuitive direct folder structures, automates some of the most repetitive tasks like typings, minifications, bundling for production, code splitting, and more. And some battery includes like data fetching, state management, meta tags, helpers, route guards, cookies, uh, error handling, bundle analyzer, and more. And it is supported by a community of web builders that have an ecosystem of npm, or they use npm, Discord, GitHub, Twitter. So to understand what Nuxt can offer as a developer is a type safety, performance, production scale, production grade, full stack web applications and website, while enjoying is the benefit of hot mode reload and a performant production server side rendering by default. So some of the benefit of using Nuxt is the automations and conventions like the file route baiting, the code splitting, server-side rendering out of the box, data fetching utility, auto import, zero config TypeScript support, and configure build tools, as well as the server-side rendering out of the box. That is faster initial load times, improves SEO, as well as accessibility, better performance on low power device, faster caching page server engine using Nitro that unlock new full stack capabilities. In development, in development, we use rollup and Node.js workers to harness the multiple CPU cores in our machine. And in production, Nuxt bundle the server and the app into a one universal output on the output directory, which already minified and it is light without any of the Node.js model except polyfills, and you can deploy this output on any supporting or any system supporting JavaScript, such as Node.js, serverless, workers, edge side rendering caching, or purely static. And it's production ready because the output, as we mentioned, can be deployed on any of those sites. It is modular. We can extend the functionality of our app through a Nuxt development kit. And I also look at the overview of the architecture of Nuxt. That is the Nuxt core. Remember, after all, the whole idea of Nuxt is to provide an optimized user experience, improving the developer experience, as well as make this or provide support by the web community or the web builders, or providing support by the web community. So this is the Nuxt core. It also comes with bundlers for Webpack, which is a JavaScript-based bundler, or Vite, a Go-based bundler, the command line interface Nuxt, the server engine like Nitro, okay, which is when we talk about engine, in this particular case, the server engine is the heart of the application that provides a set of capabilities that are particularly for that task or for that goal. In this case, the server. Development kit, so we can extend our Nuxt app much more easily, and the Nuxt 2 bridge. So we can easily migrate Nuxt 2 applications to Nuxt 3. So the recommend is to read about those concepts and get yourself familiar with. And then the key concept, which is part of their documentation, right? Their key concept, like out imports, the LDR is that by default, you can use the Vue or Nuxt composable, and it will automatically import that. So for Vue is the Vue APIs, your helper functions or your composable, and for Nuxt as well as the components, the plugins, or any other Nuxt composable, right? Like data fetching, for example. And also you have to be careful when you use that, because context here matters. So then I look at the Vue.js development. The reason why they choose that is, first, the reactivity system. Once the data change, it automatically triggers updates on the interface. The components-based templating, while keeping the HTML as the common language of the web, and enables intuitive patterns to make your interface consistent and robust. And it is very efficient and performance at scale for small to large web applications. And I also look at the subtle difference between Nuxt 2 and Vue 2 and the Vue 3 and Nuxt 3. The main difference is that they refactor the virtual DOM from scratch, and they refactor the virtual DOM from scratch, composition API, and TypeScript support by default. Now then I jump to the rendering modes. Okay, and here the browser and the server can interpret JavaScript to render view components into HTML element. And this process is called rendering it. This is something very important and critical to understand. Okay, so anytime you define as an npm command, or when you run an npm command that serve the content to the browser and the local development, so what it's doing behind the scene is whether the server or the browser, especially Node.js, and the browser, that both of them can interpret JavaScript to render view components into HTML elements. Okay, Nuxt support both the client side and the universal rendering, and each one of them has a pros and cons, and understanding is crucial, especially for your use case. So the client side rendering, by default, Vue.js applications is rendering on the browser. So Vue will render or Vue will generate HTML elements once the browser has downloaded all the JavaScript necessary to run or to create your interface, which is the JavaScript file that contains the Vue.js framework. So, in other words, first the browser downloads an empty HTML, then the browser download and parse the JavaScript codes, and then your app is rendering and interactive. So there are several pros and cons of this. The first is speed up the development, because now you only work is on the browser, so there is no need a server to run that. Also, you can host your static source, or you can statically host your web app in any static hosting server, and it will work just fine. It will works offline, okay, because now you can working while the internet is gone, and it is cheaper again because there is no server involved. You can host your client-side applications in any static server. The cons is, well, performance and SEO. Performance, because now the user has to wait for your content to be loaded and rendered, and for the SEO, web crawlers will wait for your content to be fully rendered. So there is an impact on how your website or web app is indexed by the web crawler. So most common example of using client-side rendering applications is applications that are heavily interactive, such as SaaS, back office applications, or online games. And then I look at the universal rendering. So when the browser requests a URL to a server in a universal rendering, the client side and the rendering. So the server returns a fully rendering HTML page to the browser. So whether the page has been generated in advance and catch, or it is rendering on the fly, at some point Nuxt has to run the JavaScript or the Vue code in the server environment, producing the HTML document. Remember, after all, Vue is responsible for generate the HTML elements or the HTML document. So users get immediately the content of our applications, contrary of the client-side rendering, and this step is a traditional server-side rendering performed by PHP or Ruby applications. So to not lose the benefit of the client-side rendering, okay? So to not lose the benefit of the client-side rendering, such as dynamic interface and page transition, so the client loads the JavaScript code that runs on the server in the background once the HTML document has been downloaded. Okay. The browser interprets it again, hence universal, and then Vue.js takes control of the document and enables interactivity. Making a static page interactive in the browser is called hydratation. And universal rendering allows a Nuxt application to provide quick page load while preserving the benefit of the client-side rendering, such as dynamic interface and page transitions. So this is something very, very important to understand and to explain to others. Okay? Yeah, and to explain to others. Totally, totally. And to explain to yourself and then to others. Okay? So the whole point of this to understand how this universal rendering works, okay, is that understand what happened when the browser requests a URL in this universal rendering. Okay, so the server returns a fully HTML rendering page, and whether the page has been generated in advance and catch or on the fly, Nuxt has to run the Vue.js JavaScript code to render the HTML document. So users get immediately the content contrary to the client-side rendering applications, and that step behaves similar to the traditional server-side rendering performed by PHP and Ruby. And to not lose the benefit of the client-side rendering, like dynamic rendering and page transitions, so the client loads the JavaScript code that runs on the server. Okay, so the clients load the JavaScript code that runs on the server in the background once the HTML document has been downloaded, and the browser interpreted it again, hence universal rendering, and Vue.js takes control of the document and enables interactivity. Interesting. Holy moly. Holy moly. Okay. Making a static page interactive in the browser is called hydratation, which is exactly what happened here. So making a static page interactive in the browser is called hydratation. So bringing interactivity to a static HTML in the browser is called hydratation. And this is what happened here. Okay, so now in the universal rendering, the server side or the server generate the HTML to the browser. So the browsers render the full. Sorry. So the browser render the fully HTML, and then the browsers download and run the JavaScript codes okay, the Vue.js control, and now in the iteration step, or when the iteration step is complete, the apps becomes fully interactive. Okay. So the app becomes fully interactive. So universal rendering allows Nuxt applications to provide quick page load while preserving the benefit of the client-side rendering. Quick page load while preserving the benefit of the client-side rendering. So the pros is you got a performance applications because now the content is in there, is present, and also improve the accessibility, as well as the search engine optimizations, because now the web crawlers don't have to wait in contrast with client-side rendering applications the content so they can index quickly. The cons is development constraint, because now you have to work with both APIs, and they don't like the server and the browser, and they don't provide the same capability, and it can be tricky to make it work seamlessly. Okay, unfortunately, Nuxt provide guidelines and specific variables. So Nuxt provide guidelines and specific variables to help you determine where a piece of code is executed. And then you have the cost. A server needs to be running in order to render a page on the fly. Exactly. So the cost is, well, a server needs to be running in order to render a page on the fly. And this will add monthly cost like a traditional server. However, the server costs are highly reduced thanks to the universal rendering, with the browser taking over on the client-side navigation. So example of the universal rendering application is it cover or it can fit almost any case: blogs, marketing websites, portfolio, e-commerce site, and marketplace. So the summary is the client side and universal rendering are different strategies to display an interface in a browser, like this. Okay. But the client side and universal rendering are a different strategy to display content on the browser. And Nuxt has now different rendering strategy for that, like hybrid rendering, where you can indicate which routes to catch, okay, and rendering on CDN edge workers. And again, this is an experimental. Route rules are still under active development, so and uh, and are subject to change. And subject to change. But it's okay that it's okay to mention that. Now then, I look at the server engine here. Type error loading dynamically imported model. Okay. What about here? What about now? Okay, get started. That's right. The guy here, server engine. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and it was an error dynamic loading. Then. All right. Okay, so you have the server engine. Another key concept. So server engine Nuxt 3 is powered by a new server engine called Nitro. So again, Nitro creates, build, and deploy universal web servers everywhere. Exactly, universal web servers anywhere. The open engine powering Nuxt and open to everyone. Rapid development, deploy everywhere, portable and compact. Say goodbye to Node.js model or no model output size is less than 1 megabyte. File system routing, automatically register server and API routes. Okay, minimal design to fit any solution with minimal overheat. Code splitting, TypeScript, storage layer, cache API. Powerful built-in caching, storage layer, multi-driver and platform agnostic storage system. TypeScript, hackable, built to be customized with a plugin hook system. Auto imports, automatically imports utility for a minimal and clean code base. Only the used one will be added to the final bundle. Backward compatibility. So you can use legacy npm package, CommonJS, and mocking Node.js models for workers. Made with love. So now that I understand is the concept and the fundamentals. So create, build, and deploy universal web server everywhere. Unify JavaScript tools. On JS Magicast, programmatically modify JavaScript and TypeScript source code with a simplified, elegant, and familiar syntax. Magicast. And Kickstart from Pia. Magicast. Magical modify JavaScript and TypeScript files and write back magically just like JSON. Export, import, manipulate models, import and export at ease. Function arguments, easily manipulate argument passed to a function called like define config. Smart formatting, readable. Get rid of the complexity of AST, abstract syntax tree manipulation, and make your code super readable. Abstract syntax tree. Modify a file. Go to modify and append B to full props and default export. Import load file, write file, Magicast. Go to modify and append B. Okay, go to modify and append B to full props. Of default export. Load file, write file. mode.export.default.foo push B. Holy crap. Example, directly use AST utils. Parse model. Parse to AST. Export default. Ensure foo is an array. Add a new array member. Generate code. God damn it. Example, get the EST directly. Directly use EST utils. Do something with the EST. Abstract syntax tree. Function parameters. Create a function call. A JavaScript is a very dynamic language. You should be aware that Magicast convention cannot cover all possible cases. Magicast serves as a simple and maintainable interface to update static Static-ish JavaScript code. When interacting with Magic code, no. Be aware that every option might have to change to throw an error depending on the input code. We recommend to always wrap the code and try catch. High-level helpers. Clone this repository. Install the latest LST version of Node. Enable Corpack using Corpack enable. It's okay. It's a very interesting tool. Very interesting tool. Yeah. Okay, but that's what is Nitro. Okay, a universal create, build, and deploy. This three step is important. So Nitro is allow you to create, build, and deploy universal web servers anywhere. So Nuxt 3 is powered by a new server engine, Nitro. It's a cross-platform support for Node.js, browsers, service workers, and more. Okay, serverless support out of the box, API route support, automatic code splitting and async load chunks, hybrid mode for static plus serverless site, and development server with hot motor reload. As we look on the docs, right, that server engine unlock new full stack capability, whether it's on the development, it use roll up and Node.js workers, whereas on deployment or on production, Nuxt generate the app and the server in a universal output folder, which already minify and it is light without the node models. Only yeah, without the node model, only the polyfills, and this is already mini. So and this output can be deployed on any system supporting JavaScript, whether it's Node, serverless, workers, edge caching, or purely static hosting. Mm. So cross-platform support for Node.js browser, servers, worker, and more. Serverless support out of the box. API route support. Automatic code splitting and async loaded chunk. Hybrid mode for static plus serverless site. Development server with hot motor reloading. So server API endpoints and middlewares are added by Nitro that internally use H3. And H3 is a minimal HTTP framework built for high performance and portability. Mm, in worker environment. H3 in worker environment. Without using Nitro, Nuxt Nitro. Here are overall steps. Hopefully we can help you to implement. Cloudflare API. Mm, In Cloudflare workers, readable string does not have a pipe. Yeah, very, very narrow specific one. So the server API endpoints and the middleware. Server directory Nuxt automatically scans files inside of the server API, server routes, and server middleware directory to register APIs and server handlers with HTML support. Each file should export a default function defined with the define event handler. The handler can directly return a JSON data, a promise, or use the event node.js response.end to send a response. Okay, the word is using the event emitter. Okay. Example, create a new file in server API hello.ts. Define event handler. You can now universally call this API using await fetch API hello. Server routes. Prefix API version 4 cookies trappability. If you want to override any option on runtime, you may use Nuxt 3 runtime config. Meaning that we can use that. Learn how to use setup strapping model in your Nuxt 3 application. So we can make sure to rely on that and make our HTTP calls learn how to use a strapping model in your Nuxt 3 application. This model exposes composables that are auto-imported by Nuxt 3. Depending on which version you have in your options, you will be using either the version 3 or version 4. So use Strappy course, type of course, find one course. Interesting. Use Strappy and I'll wait for the response. Check out the Strappy get entry REST API endpoint. Find one, create, update, delete the classic crew operations and count. Use Strappy GraphQL. Okay. Use inline queries to define that. I think I'll go with the Strappy GraphQL, the Strappy client, the Strappy URI version. Use a Strappy version, use a Strappy media. This is something, this is a composable function. When it comes to authentication, Mm-hmm. Logout register forgot, recess, change password, save email confirmation. Get provider authentication, fetch user, advance. Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, so things starting to make sense here. Mm-hmm. Because after all, Nuxt automatically scan files inside of the server API and server route. Server API, server route, and server middleware. Directories to register API and server handlers with HMR support. And then is the server middleware. Nuxt will automatically read any file in the server middleware to create server middleware for your project. Middleware handlers will run on every request before any other server routes and add or check headers, log requests, or extend the event request object. Server plugins. Nuxt will automatically read any files in the server plugins directory and register them as Nitro plugins. This allows extending Nitro runtime's behavior and hooking into lifecycle events. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Server utilities. Use example matching route parameters, matching HTTP method, catch all routes, handling requests with body, handling requests with query parameters, error handling, returning other status code, accessing runtime config, accessing request cookie, Nitro configuration. Mm, holy sh! Okay, okay, interesting. So the API layer, so server API endpoints and middlewares are added by Nitro that internally use H3, which is a lightweight HTTP server. Key features include server endpoint, server API endpoints, and middleware are added by Nitro. Key features include handlers can directly return objects arrays for an automatically handling JSON response. Okay, so they can automatically return a JSON response. Handler can return promise, which will be awaited and also supported. Helper functions for body parsing, cookie handling, redirects, headers, and more. Check out the H3 docs for more. Learn more about the API layer in the server directory. Direct API calls, but okay, so this server engine would provide cross-platform support for Node.js browser, service worker, and more. Serverless support out of the box. API route supports automatic code splitting and async loaded chunk. Hybrid mode for static and serverless site. Development server with hot motor reloading. The API layer with the server API endpoints and middleware are added by Nitro that internally use the H3, this lightweight HTTP server. And the key features include handlers can directly return object or arrays for an automatically handling JSON response. Handlers can return promise which will be awaited, okay, and helper function for body parsing, cookie handling, redirect handler, and more. Okay, on the server. Learn more about the API layer in the server directory. Again, since Nuxt in production generate the app and the server, by default it creates these universal applications. That's one of the reasons why you have this here. Okay, direct API calls. Nitro allows direct calling of routes via the globally available $fetch helper. This will make an API calls to the server if run on the server. Wait, what? Nitro allows directly calling of route via the globally available fetch helper. This will make an API calls to the server if run on the browser, but will directly call the relevant function if run on the server, saving an additional API call. So fetch API, after all, you can globally, so need to allow direct calling of route via the globally available fetch helper. This will make an API calls to the server if run on the browser, but will directly call the relevant function if run on the server, saving an additional API call. $fetch API is using of fetch with key features including automatic parsing of JSON response with access to raw response if needed. Okay, automatic parsing of JSON response. Request body and parameters are automatically handled with correct content type headers. For more info on fetch features, check out the fetch. Okay, the API layer, the direct API calls if running on the browser, but will directly call the relevant function if run on the server, saving an additional API call. Type API routes. When using API routes or middleware, Nitro will generate typing for this route as long as you are returning a value instead of using the rest.end to send a response. You can access this type when using $fetch or useFetch. Standalone server. Nitro produces a standalone server this that is independent of node models. The server in Nuxt 2 is not a standalone and require part of Nuxt cores to be involved by running Nuxt with a Nuxt of Nuxt 2 or Nuxt distribution or custom programmatic use, which is fragile and prone to breakage and not suitable for serverless and service workers environments. Nuxt 3 generates this when running Nuxt build into a .output directory. This output contains runtime codes to run your Nuxt server in any environment, including experimental browser, service worker, and server your static files, making it true hybrid framework for the Jamstack. In addition, Nuxt implements a native storage layer supporting multiple source drivers and local assets. Okay. Okay, so with that, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye bye.